This video will show you the best practices for adding different types of Prismic data to your Next.js page. This includes using components from Prismic SDKs such as Prismic Next Image, Prismic Text, and Prismic Link to improve your development speed and save you time when rendering data. This video assumes you've already queried your Prismic data on your page. If you haven't, you can watch this previous video to show you the basics of querying. For our examples, we've returned the Prismic content in a variable called page and passed this to the default React component, which is exported as homepage. For content coming from your static zone like titles or SEO content, you can access this in the data object. Then output this content in the page component. You can see in this example, the title information is accessed at page.data.title. We use the Prismic rich text component from the Prismic React SDK to render this data. This is because rich text fields are delivered in an array that contains information about the text formatting, which you can see here. This is how that title would be output as HTML on the page with no styling. If we want to add CSS classes to change the H1 elements in this rich text, we can use the components property. In this example, we added some Tailwind classes to update the styling, and you can see the result. You can learn more about using this feature with the docs linked in the description. For the SEO content, which might go in Next.js's head component, you will need to output it as plain text and not HTML. You can do this using the as text helper from the Prismic Helpers SDK. Metadata such as the UID, type and first publication date are in the top level of the Prismic document object, so it can be accessed directly in our example at page.uid, page.type and page.firstpublicationDate respectively. Next, let's render our slices. Slices are also in the data object as an array, and thanks to the SliceZone helper component, you don't need to match each slice component and content on the page. This is done for you by the SliceZone component and slice machine, which creates an index file to match the slice components created in your project with the slice content coming from Prismic. The index file should be in the slices folder of your project, or whatever you've chosen to name your slice library folder. To hook everything together, import the SliceZone component from the Prismic React SDK and the index file of the components from the slices folder as a variable. Then pass the components import variable to the components attribute and pass the slice content from Prismic to the component by declaring page.data.slices in the slices attribute. Since the SliceZone component handles the parsing of your components and passes your data down as props using the variable slice, you only have to concentrate on coding your slices. Here's an example of how this is templated on the page. When it comes to templating slices, Slice Machine suggests code for each individual field. You can see the suggested code by clicking the Show Code Snippets button in Slice Machine, and you'll see the API ID for the field is already connected to the necessary code or helper components for templating the field. So for example, this rich text field can be added to the component with its data accessed at slice.primary.exampleRichText, primary being the content from the non-repeatable zone. Fields in the repeatable zone of a slice can be accessed in the items array, and their suggested code snippets come wrapped in a map function to render each instance of the repeatable field created by the content author in Prismic. Each repeatable field doesn't need to be in a separate map function, so you can combine them inside one function. This example uses Prismic Next Image, imported from the Prismic Next SDK to render the image field. It will also render the alt text content for the image. For your navigation menus, a good practice is to import them as components and pass data as props down from a separate query. You may worry about doing multiple queries, but you should experience no page speed loss if your website is statically deployed. Now you've got the basics for templating your Prismic content, you can concentrate on building and styling amazing pages and components with Next.js.